Thank God for microphones, because I woke up this morning with no voice. Thank you, Grant, and I'd like to thank the library for having me back. I think this is the third or fourth time, and thank all of you for coming. I suspect that a number of you also woke up this morning without a voice. No? At any rate, I'm very happy to be here, and I'm happy to see all of your bright, smiling, keen faces. I think that you may want to know why I would set out to write a book with a title as inflammatory as a passion for Paris. I may be preaching to the converted here, but I would also say that you might want to bear in mind that passion also means pain, suffering, and intense emotions, the Passion of Christ. And what my book is ambiguous in that way. I don't think I'm going to tell you tonight whether I think Paris is the most romantic city on earth. I think I want to hear from you what you think. And I want you to read the book, and then we can have a coffee and talk about it. I have been here for nearly 30 years. Actually, 30 years. I rented my maid's room in October of 1985. I was about to say 1885 because I'm sort of stuck in the 19th century, like most Parisians, at least the ones who were born here. I had come to Paris for the first time in the 70s, the mid-70s, and as a Californian with an Italian mother who had lived for a couple of years in Rome as a child. I think the first time I came to Paris, I was astonished by many things, the first of which was the brusqueness of the people and the sense that they didn't care whether I was there or not. I was used to people being friendly. The Parisians were not unfriendly, but I had recently read The Invisible Man, and I understood immediately what that was all about. Because in Paris, I was invisible. Now, like many people, I had studied French, as a child, and in high school and whatnot. And my French was very bad. I spoke Italian and tried to make it sound French. And that didn't go down very well. So I was planning to stay here for a year when I moved here in 1986 and write the great American novel in my maid's room. And at the end of the year, I met Allison, my wife, Allison Harris, the photographer, and that was the primary reason I stayed back then. I was always fascinated by this notion of Paris as a very romantic place. I think what a lot of people don't understand is that Paris is perceived as romantic just about everywhere. I've talked to people from all over the world, and a country I know very well, a people I know very well, the Italians, think of Paris as the most romantic place. They have Rome and Venice, and you would think that that would be pretty good, but for Italians, there is something very special about Paris, as there is for Americans. One thing I did not put in the book because I had to cut out a third of it because I tend to write abundantly, is that I grew up knowing from my mother and from my favorite Italian uncle that he had come to Paris in the interwar period as an artist. He was a painter, a very fine painter, and lived in a maid's room, and he did the whole thing. He was a real bona fide romantic. And somehow that was inculcated into me when I was a child. And when I moved here, I had forgotten about that. I just wanted to be here and write my novel and live the experience, live my own bohem. And I realized that at some point that I was reliving this family pattern. And here I am, all these years later, and I am still trying to figure out exactly why Paris is such a romantic place. Now, I'm not going to make the claim that it's the most romantic city in the world. For one thing, I haven't been everywhere in the world. So, someone asked me the other day, is Paris the most beautiful city in the world? They was completely bouche bée, enthusiastic, and this is absolutely wonderful. And I said, well, I don't know. I haven't been everywhere in the world. I suspect it's certainly one of the most beautiful cities in the world. And I think that that's part of the spell, because I think that Paris does work a kind of magic spell on people. This book is really about the reasons why Paris has this magic and is perceived as being so romantic. This is not a guidebook telling you where to kiss or, how to put a lock on a bridge or something like that. And it has a very dark side because the Romantic period, as all of you know, was a very dark period of history, a very exciting period. It was the beginning of the modern world as we know it, really. Now, speaking of locks, I wanted to show this. This is a lovely little lock that fell off the Pont des Arts and struck me on the shoulder some months ago. Conveniently, just before we were going to the United States on book tour. I was on book tour for about 3 months. And this lock has a date of 2014, and underneath it says forever. And the name is Christine and Yuan. And it was made in China. Okay. Now, you have all watched the Pont des Arts being stripped of its locks, but no sooner are they cut off of the Pont des Arts than they bloom and spread all over, and some people think this is wonderful and others think it's a disease, and they can't understand it. Now, I know that people get really hot under the collar about this because my wife and I take lots of people on private tours, and I like to show them the bridges and see what their reactions are. One of the amusing things about one of the bridges is that underneath all the locks there was a graffiti written in French that said, "Love in chains is not love," and it was written in French. And all of the people putting their locks on were Chinese, Japanese, American, Brazilian, whatever, you name it. I spent a long time on these bridges watching people and listening, and I have never encountered a French person on one of the bridges. I don't know, maybe I'm wrong, but I think that by and large, Parisian notions of love and of romance are very different from everyone else's notions of love and romance. And I think this is what everyone else in the world thinks of. I mean, not everyone, because clearly a lot of people think this is ridiculous and adolescent, and, an act of vandalism and all of that. But I think that the Parisians are very different. They perceive things differently. I know this firsthand for a number of reasons, not only because I've been here forever, but I have a California driver's license, okay? I go all over the world, I need to be able to drive. The French would never accept my California driver's license because there is no treaty signed between California and France. I've driven 1 million kilometers. Even with one eye, I drive better than most people. And so I'm now having, after all these years, to take the driver's exam and do all of this nonsense because I've been stopped by the gendarme too many times and they're going to put me in jail. So I opened my little booklet to take to study for the test, and what do I find? Here's a sample. You're not going to be able to see this, but you'll have to trust me. They show a diagram of the road with cars and who has the priority from the left or the right. And guess what the two streets are called? Guess what this intersection is of? I know. Now, I know you can all guess what one of them. Victor Hugo, Rue Victor Hugo. And the other one is Rue Edgar Poe. Edgar Poe. They don't say Edgar Allan Poe, it's Edgar Poe. And you know why they all know Edgar Poe and why everyone reads Edgar Poe here more than in America? I'll tell you why. Because of this character here, Charles Baudelaire, who started out by translating the entire opus of Edgar Poe, and he became so obsessed with Edgar Poe that he dressed like him and he spoke like him, and he thought, honestly, that he was incarnating Edgar Poe's characters. Now, Baudelaire, I call this my Baudelaire bag. I traveled all over America with this, and there is a method to this madness. Baudelaire famously said, "Le beau est toujours bizarre," right? And he was picking up on a phrase, a famous phrase, said by Victor Hugo, which was, "Le beau est le laid, et le laid est le beau." Beautiful is ugly, and ugly is beautiful. Okay? This is at the root of Romanticism, which was extremely modern. We think of Romanticism now as, you know, these people with funny clothes, dark clothes, and you know, writing love letters and all of that. But Romanticism was a modernist movement. The first ones to use modern, the term modern, consistently, when they weren't talking about cuisine, were the Romantics. In fact, everything that they did was in juxtaposition to les anciennes or the classicists. So in some places you see them referred to as les anciennes. And, now, this morning, I was walking across town and I saw a poster for a play which has been running now for a very long time, starring Georges. It's all about the life of Georges Sand, right? Then this afternoon, on the way over here actually, we were handed this flyer at a play at the Théâtre de Saint-Louis, Flaubert, lettre à Louise Collet. Okay, Louise Collet and Flaubert are important in my book. They're not the heroes of the book. I turned on the radio this afternoon, and guess what came out? An excerpt of Les Misérables. And Les Misérables is a musical. The radio announcer said has been playing for 36 years, uninterrupted for 36 years. Now, I'm telling you all of this because my conviction is the reason Paris is such a romantic city is that it is still living in the Romantic age. That the Parisians, the French in general, but especially the Parisians, are living in the 19th century, which was their heyday. And I think that they are so imbued with these things, they don't even know it anymore. But they are bursting with Baudelaire and Victor Hugo and Balzac and Georges Sand. I mean, I think Georges Sand is probably read more today than she ever was, and she was very popular in her day. This is a little curiosity that maybe all of you got. We got this in our mailbox. Did you remember receiving this a few months back?
No.
Okay. The repertoire, the listing of all writers who write in French, who are in this software, piece of software that the French have come up with for the francophonie. That piece of software is called Balzac. This is brand new. Okay? Just before we went off, the Salon de Paris, just before we went to America on book tour, the Figaro Littéraire came out like this. I'm sure some of you saw this. You don't read the Figaro, I don't usually either, but it was in a cafe, so we took it. But guess who is the most popular writer, period, of all time? Still, today. You recognize this guy, don't you? He was on banknotes. He has hundreds and hundreds, if not thousands, of roads named for him, lycées, hospitals, everything you can imagine. That's Victor Hugo. Okay? 36.5% of the French. Favorite writer. And if you look through the other statistics, here are all the favorite writers. Most of them are 19th century. Most of them are romantics. Now, the most popular writer in France, believe it or not, perhaps he may be a great writer, I don't know, I have never read him, is, oh gosh, his name just went right out of my head. And he's the most popular writer in France, Marc Lévy. Okay, 25.1% compared to Victor Hugo's 36.5%. Victor Hugo died in 1885. Okay, do you know what the title of Marc Lévy's current mega bestseller is? Has anyone here read it?
Well, I haven't read it, but it's
Elle est lui, bravo. Do you know what the title of Georges Sand's famous confessional memoir, which was completely redacted and made up, and of her love affair with Alfred de Musset was called? Elle est lui. Same book, written in the 21st century then. You wonder why Paris is a romantic place? I'll tell you why Paris is a romantic place. It's because it's still in the 19th century. I mean, if you, actually, I think it's got one foot in the Grand Siècle of Louis XIV, and the other one during the conquest of Gaul. And Grant was very good with Vercingétorix. Again, it's not up to me to tell you that Paris is the most romantic city on the planet. I think that most of the studies and statistics show that millions, if not billions, of people across the planet think it is. And I guess what I'm getting at is that the operating system, if you will, we're not talking about the programs and the application, but the operating system of Paris is romantic. It's from the Romantic age. So I go back to what I was saying earlier about the darkness of the Romantic age. Baudelaire was pretty dark. Balzac was pretty bleak, pretty dark, fabulous. Even Victor Hugo was very dark, and if you look at his paintings, they're extraordinarily dark. He had a very dark vision. He was trying to bring in light into the world through his politics too. He famously said when the last thing he said was, "I see black light." And I think that the key to understanding this spell, this magic that Paris has a lot to do with blackness and negativity and suffering and passion, okay? So anyone who thought that I had written this nice rosy little book about skipping around Paris and kissing on bridges and going to romantic places, which is admittedly the way the publisher is trying to promote it, is going to be unhappy with my book. I shouldn't be telling you this. I should read little happy things from it, and but I'm not that way. I'm going to read you one little bit of the book, and then open this up to questions, because otherwise I'm just going to croak. I mean, literally start croaking. This is three months worth of, and we found some incredibly romantic places. Some of them we already knew. But we wandered around Beacon Hill at night with the gas lamps, and those are real gas lamps going. It was wonderful. We were in the Ramble in New York, and in the park, in Central Park. It was fabulous. Lots and lots of places. So there are wonderful neighborhoods and things and items in America and elsewhere that are very romantic. I'm not sure there's another big city that's like Paris. Rome, I lived in Rome. My mother's Roman. I love it. It's fantastic. Is it romantic? Yes. But it's this chaotic, absolute mess. It's insanity. It's crazy. And in Venice, you just want to blow your head off. It's so wonderful and beautiful. I mean, I hope you don't. I went to university there for a while, and it's fantastic. If you can survive the mosquitoes, it's extremely romantic. But, anyway, Paris, I think, is fundamentally different. Now, in the book, I'm talking here about the fact that from my office, which I no longer have, but when I wrote this, I did, I'd get out of the elevator and I'd look down through this picture window down on a very old building across the street. And I knew that that was the building where Balzac had worked when he was writing Pot Boilers, and was very young. No one wanted to publish him. He lived under the roof, no heat, absolutely miserable. He was there for a number of years. He wrote something like six to eight books. And I would step out of the elevator and I'd look down there, and it just filled me with joy. And I was so happy looking down, and I'd spy on the people coming and going in the room. And then I was researching this book, and I got all these reference books, and I discovered that the road had been renumbered, and I was looking at the wrong building. And not only that, but the real building where he had lived, a block down, had been destroyed, with the modernization, the improvement of Paris. And so I was at the Arsenal Library, because I visited a lot of places and I interviewed a lot of people. So I was with the director of the Arsenal Library, which, as everyone knows, is where Romanticism began in France. The Romantics would meet in the Arsenal Library, which was directed by Charles Nodier. Well, Charles Nodier died about 150 years ago. However, his spirit lives on, believe me. It's a fantastic place. And the new director, the current director, is this very affable gentleman, very distinguished. And I told him my little story about Balzac's garret, and he sort of looked at me in this very sophisticated, elegant Parisian way, and he said, sometimes, he remarked, it is better not to know. He'd spoken softly, sadly, but with an ambiguous smile. What did he mean, it's better not to know? Did he mean knowledge was the source of unhappiness or disappointment? Perhaps he meant my quest would end in tears, that pulling the curtains open and revealing the wizard of Romanticism, the wizard of Paris, might destroy the magic and shatter life-sustaining myths. Clearly he was being facetious. Ignorance is by definition never blissful, not in this culture where being smart is sexy, where intellectual is a job title, and philosophers run government ministries, make movies, and write best-selling books. On the scale of disapprobation, only blind faith is lower than ignorance, or that bane of Frenchmen, optimism, the maddeningly positive worldview no thoughtful Parisian can abide. Knowledge destroys bliss and engenders melancholy, but in Paris, melancholy has long been prized. It is a sign of intelligence and thoughtfulness, and lies at the roots of Romanticism and Romance. As I walked toward the Ides Saint-Louis, I smiled with satisfaction. The old-fashioned street lamps cast their patented fuzzy antique halos, a nostalgic romantic mood carefully engineered by Paris's master lighting designers to evoke the days of old. This was not bright, optimistic light. It was the objective correlative of feeling blue, a permanent heure bleue, as the French call the gloaming or twilight. No, I reflected, as I often do when I walk at nightfall, looking into the shops and restaurants and upper floor apartments lit like stage sets. Nothing in Paris is left to chance. Ignorance does not bring bliss, not in France. The more I thought about ignorance, bliss, and melancholy, the more my mind circled from Balzac to the Arsenal Library, and then back to an unusual study of the French I first read in 2013. It made waves everywhere in the world except, naturally, in Paris, where it was met with a shrug. A French scientific researcher named Claudia Sénic coined the phrase, quote, French idiosyncratic unhappiness. It is what I've long thought of as the Balzac Baudelaire syndrome. In its essence, the Sénic study suggests the French are happiest when unhappy. The reasons are many, too many to fit in a single book. As Sénic told Maureen Dowd of the New York Times, quote, our happiness function is a little deficient. It's really in the French genome. I'm not making this up. Defying even the worst projections of the most skillful pessimists, France typically ranks lower than Iraq or Afghanistan in terms of expectations. Mental illness, depression, and the use of antidepressants are, quote, exceptionally high by European standards. Suicide is as common in real life as it is in the pages of Balzac. This is not a cause for alarm. It seemed to me, as I thought about the study, to mean simply that the French are unhappy by the standards of other nations, and perhaps even their own, and that this idiosyncratic unhappiness is permanent and a source of secret joy and fulfillment. Sardonic unhappiness doesn't keep Parisians from being romantic or seeking love, for instance. And their curmudgeonly stewardship of one of the world's most appealing cities must surely be part of the magic of this perplexing place. I can scarcely conceive of a type of beauty, wrote Baudelaire, in which there is no melancholy. Balzac is even better. Your melancholy was a charm, your unhappiness an attraction, he rhapsodized. Short of adding vitamin D and selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors to the drinking water, or performing genetic therapy, the zeitgeist is unlikely to change. Should it? The essence, the kernel of Romanticism, is a longing for the lost certainties of faith and divine right on one hand, and the heroism of reason without God, king, or certainty on the other. A belief in the heroism of the modern age, as Baudelaire called it. The heroism of the individual is the prime ingredient not just in Romanticism. Opposing forces of a similar kind are everywhere and in constant embattled balance in the dualistic French psyche, where hero worship has replaced religion. As I neared the Pont Marie and scented the Seine's churning waters, I realized there was a chain leading me forward from Balzac's vanished garret, across the stone sidewalks of the city, and backward to the heart of the romantic agony, to one of the key secrets of Paris's romantic identity. I was not thinking of agony in the writings of the Marquis de Sade, or Mario Praz, but rather of the collective French mental inner sanctum, a temple founded on the principle of paradox. Simply stated, the principle is that without all this necessary complexity, ambiguity, and apparent contradiction, the layer cake of Paris so many people find appetizing would not exist today. Had Paris been inherited by a pragmatic, optimistic, change is possible, yes you can, forward-looking nation that worships sunshine and good health and bleached teeth, what elements of the moldering old, impractical, unprofitable, dark, smelly, but enchanting past would have survived? Now, I think we know the answer to that. So with that charming, uplifting thought, I'm going to say, let's have the questions and answers. And if there are no questions, that's okay. We can just start drinking. He was the great romantic. He was a great romantic. Read his love letters to Anna Hanska. I mean, his whole life was, he was the
Yes.
consummate romantic. But
Paris was not for him. Paris was not romantic in his work.
I think I would disagree, but in any case, I do agree. As I said, I think French people in general, and Parisians in particular, perceive this city very differently from outside. You can have a city like Paris, which is, I hate to tell you this, but Paris is owned by the world. It's not just the Parisians. And you know, it is perceived very differently by everyone across the world. You talk to somebody from Shanghai, they think Paris is romantic. Really, they really do. No?
Yeah, I'm Chinese.
Okay. Please, come on and tell them. Oh, well, it's just something I've always done. And I'll tell you something else. It's either a miracle or a tragedy, I don't know, that Allison and I met, because she's the same. In fact, she's fearless. I've become more cautious. In part, I always wear these dark glasses or a patch or something, and I look like a mafioso or a murderer or something. And so people always, you know, they're wary. But Allison, you know, she's smiling and blue-eyed and got silvery hair now and everything, and she just walks into things. She opens things up and steps in, and I'm often going, Allison, Allison. In any case, I've always done that, and I think it's the best way to discover things, you know. We also enjoy sometimes pretending that, on parle pas français, excusez-nous. What are they going to do? Throw you in jail because you want? No, anyway, I'm working on a new book already, unfortunately, impossible deadline. And one of the things that I've always done, what I do, is I look at the garbage. I look at the garbage, specifically behind restaurants, because my new book is about the Parisian love affair with food. It's going to come out in a couple of years. You know, wondering if Paris is still the greatest food city. It was. I'm not sure it is. But at any rate, I'll just give you a hint. Where we are in our building, there are restaurants all underneath, all day long. What do we hear? The peep, beep, beep of the microwave. Everything is frozen, everything is already made. Everything is just stirred up with a mixer and served to people. And guess what? The restaurant underneath our building gets a rating of 4.5 on that criminal site called TripAdvisor, where these people, buffoons, go out who have no idea what they're talking about or what they're eating. And you could serve them a rubber sole, and they would think it was a fillet of sole. And so what I have always done, Grant mentioned some of my books, I started out doing investigative reporting, and I still do that. Whatever I do, that's what I always wind up doing it. They say we wind up writing the same book over and over. That's what I do. I just dig into things. And Paris is great for that. It's got a zillion hidden things. Oh boy. Look at Amazon. I mean, don't buy from Amazon. Buy from Shakespeare and Company if you want to buy my book. But go up and read some of them. Oh, he's such a cynic. He doesn't love Paris. You know, this kind of thing. You know, absolutely. Because people. But again, what is Romanticism? Romanticism is black. It is modernism. Victor Hugo talks about ugliness in the modern. Okay. It is reality. We are all romantics, all of us in here, without knowing it. Even those of you who want to destroy the welfare state and tear down the city, most of you are fundamentally down in the bone. You're romantics, because it's the operating system in America too, and in most countries. However, the book is about Paris, and so when you tell somebody something that doesn't coincide. I mean, look at the cover of this book. That's my book. Okay? I wanted a black cover. I wanted, something. And they came up with this. And they would not even show me the other cover studies.
Yeah, that's typical.
Why?
I love this publisher. My editor is fantastic. But I said, you know what you're going to get on Amazon? Because all these wonderful reviews. Amazon is the trip advisor of books, right? Every genius in the world. And, I said, they're going to look at the cover of the book and they're going to think this is some kind of scarlet romance. And then they're going to read it and they're going to write these horrible reviews. Yeah, people are resistant to it. They have this, the lock on the bridge. That's Paris romance. It's very superficial, unfortunately. Well, I would invite you to read my book, and I would invite you to read, if you haven't already, maybe you have, biographies of the existentialists, and you might realize that the existentialists were romantics. They were total romantics. Hemingway, the great modernist, he was a complete romantic. Are you kidding? All these people were romantics. Existentialism is absolutely a romantic. It's an outgrowth of Romanticism. That is the very simple answer. Modernism, Picasso, Cubism, all of that. You know who coined the word Cubism? Apollinaire. Apollinaire was a modernist romantic. You know? Sur le pont, Mirabeau, whatever. This is a continuum. It doesn't just stop, and one day you have existentialism. So they are romantics. I have no problem as viewing them as romantics. And I'm a self-confessed romantic. I even dress like them. And so does everyone else who lives in the Marais, by the way. I don't let you in if you don't dress that way. And my problem in the Marais is that I don't smoke. Yeah, I think the cityscape has a lot to do with it. And one of the things, I've got a chapter called the Architecture of Romance. And what I do is I try to give both sides of the story, because you have the eternal divide between Victor Hugo and Napoleon III. And it goes on to this day. Pompidou was the Napoleon III variety, right? I think that one of the reasons why Paris is so romantic and the romantic tradition lives on is the clash, the contrast, these two forces of darkness and light fighting each other. But I do think that the cityscape is a big part of it. Things are made to the proportion of woman and man. This is also true in other places, though, that are not romantic. Lots of Italian cities are romantic, but there are plenty of other places that aren't particularly romantic. I mean, they could just be kind of gloomy or something. I mean, Macon is made to the proportion of man. I wouldn't call Macon, or even Avignon. I don't find Avignon. I find Avignon glauque. It's wonderful. It's this medieval walled place. So I think Paris is very peculiar because it has this contrast, this mix of dark and light.
There's such a big space here, though.
Yeah, it is. I think it's the most romantic big city in the world. I would say that. I do believe that. I think there are lots of other places that are very romantic, but they're not necessarily big cities. I mean, Amsterdam I find extremely romantic. They're beautiful. Other small cities that are extremely romantic and beautiful, but not a megapolis like Paris, because it goes beyond the Beltway, as we all know. 12, 13 million people. You never leave the city. Okay. Thank you all for coming.